Hello. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to index your bicycle gears. So it is something that people struggle with, but yeah, it's pretty simple really. So a couple of things you do want to check is that your chain's not worn out, as well as your cassette, and that everything is straight. So in this video, it's just going to be indexing, but you do need to check that your gear hanger is straight and your derailleur is straight, but I'll show you sort of how it should look. So we'll just skip to the back and I'll just show you how simple it is just to set them up from scratch. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is get the chain down to the bottom. So this is your hardest gear, and that's where you're going to want to start. So you don't want to be setting up your gear in here or in the middle. It's just going to make life difficult for yourself. So drop the chain into the hardest gear, and that's where you're going to want to start. And the second thing you want to check is just make sure, if you look along this line here, that the chain runs sort of parallel with the chain on the derailleur. If it looks bent or out of line, then it might be that either your derailleur's bent or the gear hanger that it attaches to is bent. So if your hanger's bent, you can get a hanger alignment tool which will straighten up the hanger. And then if your derailleur's bent, sometimes you can bend them straight, but if it's really bad, it will be a new derailleur. And yeah, if it's all quite bent, then you're probably just going to be wasting your time and you're just not going to get the gears correct. So yeah, in this video I'm just going to show you how to do it, and everything's straight. So the hanger's straight and the derailleur is straight. It has had a knock before, so it might not be perfect. It's quite an old derailleur now, so yeah, but it does work fine. I use the bike every day, and as you can see, it is dirty, so you probably want to clean up your chain and cassette and things like that just to make it run a little bit nicer and lubricate your chain. But this is my daily sort of gravel bike, so you know, just a real world example of how it might look. So just for the sake of the video, I'm just going to disconnect the cable. So it's just a 4mm Allen key on here. This is the pinch bolt for the cable, and as you can see, there's no tension on there. So the derailleur is not relying on the cable to hold the derailleur. What it's relying on are these screws here. So these are your limit screws. So you've got a high limiter and a low limiter. So how would you know which limit screw it is? Sometimes they have an L and a H. Otherwise, if you're in your hardest gear, you look for the screw that is touching the derailleur. So as you can see, if you can see, but this right hand screw isn't touching anything and the left hand screw is touching the derailleur. So if I grab my Allen key and turn that in, the derailleur is moving inbound, so it's moving that way. The first thing you would do is get your limit screw, which is your H limit. And all I'm using here is a multi-tool. So I would screw that in until the chain on the derailleur, on the jockey wheel, is lining up with the chain on the cassette, and that's the best place you can start. So everything's in line in this gear, and then all you want to do after that is make sure you pull in the tension on your inner cable and then do up the cable clamp. So make sure that's tight because you don't want that to slip. Okay, in terms of adjustment, you have this barrel adjuster here. So as you wind that out anti-clockwise, that's adding tension on the cable because you're pulling more tension on this cable. So first of all, you would just go clockwise, so that's the loosest setting. And I do also have adjusters on the frame, but you can't really see those. So you'll either have adjusters on the frame, on the derailleur, or you might have adjusters on your gear shifters at the handlebars. So once you set your limit screw here and you've pulled enough cable through, you don't want to pull too much, but just so that the cable's taut, and then just do up this screw here. You can then move to your shifter. So if that didn't move and it was just skipping, well, there you go. So that's just skipping, it's not moving. So all you want to do is just turn this screw anti-clockwise to add more tension to the cable until it does move. So then that's on the next one. And then what you want to do really is just add the tension or decrease the tension until you get this chain exactly in the middle of the two cogs. So if you slackened it off, the chain's going to go this way, and if you add it, the chain's going to go that way. So if you add too much, the chain will start catching on this third ring. So you want to get it tensioned enough that it's basically in line and it's not touching the smallest and it's not touching the next one along. And then try the next one, shift up. So it goes up the whole way now. That's in the easiest gear. This is where your low screw comes in, because this is your low gear, your easy gear. So that is a limit screw to stop the chain going so far that it goes into the spoke. So if you had this wound undone, you could push this derailleur until it hit the spokes. So I'll show you what that looks like. So again, the right hand side screw, which is the one that wasn't touching the derailleur before, if I back that off, so if I go anti-clockwise on that, I can push the derailleur more now, so that would near enough go in the spokes. So you don't want that to happen. So the limit screws are there to stop the derailleur going any further than this ring. Screw the limit screw in gently until, so when you feel the resistance, that's when it's bottoming out. So that's bottomed out there. So if you screwed that in any more, it would push the derailleur away and then you wouldn't get the 11th gear. So I would just screw it in until you feel it seat. And then that means if I try the shifter now, it won't go into the spokes. It's as hard as I can push it. So if I pedaled now, it's not going over the top. And if you wound that off and pushed on the shifter, the chain would go over the top and it would go behind here, and you see people do it quite a lot and the spokes will get chewed up. So if that happens, it's either your limit screws too far out or your hanger's bent so that the derailleur is sitting in further than it wants to. So as long as your hanger's straight, your derailleur is straight, it's as simple as setting up your limit screws high and low and then just adding or decreasing cable tension. And the only other thing that you've got is your B screw, which is this screw here. So this is your B screw. So this will increase or decrease the gap between this top jockey wheel and your cassette. So some derailleurs, they'll have markers or a line on the back to line it up. So you would get it into first gear and you would adjust this screw until you get the cassette lined up with a line on your derailleur. So as I screw that in, it's making this gap bigger. And the bigger the gap, the less chain wrap you've got. So as you can see, this angle, an S shape, is less the further this is around. So depending on what size cassette you would have, you'd need to create more or less gap. And also it will change depending on what frame you've got. So it's not like a set height, you will need to adjust it accordingly. But this gap here is too much. You need more chain wrap on this setup. So I would get to your B screw anti-clockwise and you'll see the gap slowly closing in. So if your B screw is too close, then what will happen is, if you just listen out for this, I don't know if you'll hear it, but you'll go here and if you can hear that, the jockey wheels are catching on the cassette when it's shifting up. So I would just screw that in half a turn maybe, drop it down again, try, go up again. Maybe a slight catch there I could hear. So I might go quarter of a turn, go up through the block again, and that hasn't made a noise. And once you've done that, it's as simple as that basically. So you've set your limit screws and just go through your block now. So your limit screws are set, your cable tension's set, and your B screws set, and that is the main things that you want to check. So as long as you're setting up your cable tension in this smallest ring and setting up your high limiter in that smallest ring, so then the only other thing that you need to do is set your low limit screw, which stops the derailleur from going into the spokes, and your B limit screw, which determines the distance from your jockey wheel to your cassette. And then you do just have your cable adjustment screw to just micro adjust your chain in each gear and just get it exactly between the two cogs that you are between. And once you've set those, you shouldn't go far too wrong. So definitely check the condition of your chain. So you can get a chain checker to put on there just to measure the stretch of your chain. If it is overworn and it is overstretched, as well as your cassette being worn out, the gears won't index that well. And otherwise, if your derailleur's bent or your hanger's bent, then it's not running all parallel and you'll have issues as well. So I haven't dived into like a 3x adjustment or indexing on the front. This is just a 1x setup. So if you would like to see gear adjustments from the front, then I can do that also. But yeah, just simple gear setup, start to finish on the back. You will find different designs. So this is just a drop bar gravel bike, so it has these levers here, but if you had maybe a flat bar bike, you would have trigger shifters with adjusters for the cable tension at the top, so you can adjust your cable tension on the fly. If you're finding that you're trying to go into an easier gear and it's not quite going, then you need to add tension. If you're trying to go into a harder gear and it's not dropping down, then just loosen the tension off. The other things to look for is if you've got a cable that's sticking, that can cause drag through the system as well. So if you're trying to drop the gear and it's just not quite going there, it might be that your cable, inner and outer, is rusty, so therefore it's causing drag through the system. But it's pretty simple to set up your gears. I think a lot of people get confused and just start turning all the screws on the derailleur with not really knowing what they're there for. But there are just 3 simple screws: high limiter, low limiter, B screw, and your cable tension. And once you know what each of those do, then you can't really go far too wrong. The limit screws are to stop the derailleur going too far either way, and the cable tension is there to help the chain go up or down. So yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, if you want a video on the front gears, then please do just let me know. And if you found that informative, then please give me a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.